All right, you guys, tonight we have first-time guest that has been months in the making. Christ follower, content creator, and podcaster JT follows JC, joins the show to talk about all the things in the high strangeness realm. Bring your pen and notepad as we gallop through the myriad of historical rabbit holes, one leading to another. JT is expert at peeling back the layers of history's biggest lies of omission, and once you realize the establishment's rewrite of past events, it makes no sense. Especially concerning the archaeological evidence, you will never look at our past and present in the same way again. Leave what you have been taught at the door and bring an open mind and prepare to have your mind blown, you guys. You can find JT on all socials, including IG, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Telegram too. Everywhere at JT follows JC. Brother JC, or JT. You know what? Why we call you this all the time? Because we have a regular guest friend, a really good friend on the show, and he's JC. JC Hall.
Oh, okay. I got
so
you.
And you
my friend is Jesus Christ.
There you go. So we're going to have to start calling him JC and you Jesus, whatever it is. But hey, we had a great conversation last night on the show, on the phone, us three. I can't believe how quick we got the show together last night, but it's here. I'm having a great time, and there's a lot that we want to get to. And, glad you could join us. I see you brought a lot of your crew. I can see the numbers out there in the live chat. So welcome to the show, JT.
Well, cool. Yeah. Well, obviously, thanks to everybody who decided to come listen tonight. Yeah. And obviously, thanks for having me on. It's just, this should be fun.
Before we get going, I have one question I want to ask you, just kind of to break the ice for everybody. All right. So JT, do you ever ponder about dreams, demons, and sleep paralysis?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing about it is it's funny because, JT is my initials, but my name is Joseph, and I like to decode things. And I remember like when I was first waking up spiritually, I was always thinking like, what does this dream mean? If somebody would have a dream, I'd be like, oh, like tell it to me. And I could see if I could, and obviously you really don't know how close you got it, but I mean, it is interesting to kind of decode things.
Yeah.
And I do know that through the spiritual realm, demons obviously have an influence. And that's why people, when they say, well, I had a dream about this, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it was from God. So just, make sure it lines up with scripture before you say, God said I should do this because I dreamed this. Everybody knows we have weird dreams. Could be because we ate pizza late at night, or it could be something, it could be a spiritual entity influencing you, and it could be for the good or for the bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously sleep paralysis is interesting when you consider like people talking about like alien abductions and UFO encounters and all this stuff. And they remarkably sound like, the same thing as like, some people might call them aliens, some people might call them demons, but yeah, I think all those things kind of line up together.
Interchangeable a bit. Yeah, go ahead, Outcast.
Well, JT, since we're tracking with you on so many things, when Jesse and I were first, I guess we'd call it getting born again or deeper in our faith, shortly after COVID and starting this podcast, we had very profound, dark dreams where we felt like we were under attack. It was intimidation tactics to slow our roll. By any chance, did that happen to you in this process as well?
Oh yeah, actually, yeah. I'll just tell the story then. So in the waking up process, I stopped. I cut a bunch of things out of my life. I was like a believer. I would say that I've believed pretty much my whole life. As far as like I grew up in church, and like I had a very good, strong Christian home. Good influence by my parents, but I went to Christian school from 7th grade all the way through, like graduated from Liberty University. So I have like the background in knowing all the things, and I got baptized really young. But I think sometimes when you grow up Christian, you know how to walk that line, or like like when you're born into it, you kind of like, well, what can I do? Obviously it's the wrong kind of attitude, but like you try to walk the line, go over the line, feel bad, repent, go back over, but it wasn't until 2020, same kind of situation where my world got turned upside down, and I really needed God. Like for the first time in my life, I really felt like I needed him because I was like really on the edge. And as I was waking up spiritually, I was reading my Bible again, letting it convict me, and it was changing me big time. And then I started to watch a lot of content about like exposing code and stuff. And I was listening to like the Good Fight Ministries. I like their podcast, and they kept on talking about that movie. They sold their souls for rock and roll.
Mm.
And have you guys ever seen that?
Parts of it. I haven't
Parts
watched
of
the
it,
whole
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it was good, but it was funny because like I said, as I grew up in a Christian school, we watched Hell's Bells back in the day, which I thought was kind of going to be like the same kind of a thing. We're like, oh, guess what? AC/DC is demonic,
Yeah.
in case you guys didn't know, and all that kind of stuff. But I was watching it, and I guess it surprised me because I guess maybe because I was willing to like listen a little bit more about like the understanding why these bands were the way they were, and it wasn't just the AC/DCs or Ozzy Osbournes. It was like all of them, and they really started to show like the stuff with the Lester Crowley, and I think remember like as they were exposing who he was and then exposing the ties he had to like bands like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin. And, you know, those bands I never considered like satanic by any means, but then you see Lester Crowley's on the Sgt. Pepper's cover,
Yep.
like blew me away. Like what? Even the Beatles, and then the stuff with Elvis. And that being said, I'm watching this thing like late at night, and my old man used to like always have the TV on at night, you know, fall asleep with some white noise, I guess. And I guess I'm kind of somewhat the same way. So I'm watching this thing, and I'm watching it late at night, probably like midnight. So as I'm like falling asleep, I, I'm just dozing off, and I think the last thing I kind of remember was like Lester Crowley's ugly mug on my TV, and I like
Mm.
cut the thing off. And then so as I'm kind of like, but I'm feeling a little freaked out at this point. And I don't know why I would be scared about this, but like I'm feeling a little freaked out. And I'm a guy who likes a little bit of light in the room, and not saying I'm afraid of the dark. You know, guys, don't get it twisted. But if you need to go to the bathroom, it's nice that if you can see a little bit, you know, so like having a little bit of natural light, maybe from like the stars or the moon, and, you know, like not having I don't like blackout curtains. I don't want it to be pitch dark in the room. But I do remember as soon as I cut the TV off, I felt like my room was black, like so black and dark. And I just felt uneasy about that. And then I kind of felt like almost like I could see like a darker part of it moving around the room. And I'm
Mm.
not one of these people who like talk about spiritual things, like, cause I'm pretty grounded as far as like when somebody tells me, oh, well, God spoke to me audibly, I'm always like, really? Where were you? Like, you know, like
Right.
I can't help but be skeptical. So like when I say that I was seeing something, I was actually seeing something, and I was actually seeing like it felt like a darker shadow, but the room was already black. Like I said, and I thought it was unusually dark in the room.
I
Did you
got a
want to say something?
question. Yeah. So this shadow, we've talked about this kind of stuff on the show a lot. Um, could you make out the shadow? What did it just look like did it have something on? Did it have a hat on or anything? Did it have,
No, it was not the Hat Man.
okay,
It was more like I said, because the room was dark, but I could feel almost like a presence in there.
just a
And then
shadow
at one point,
figure?
yeah, it was just like it was like a moving blackness in the room,
Okay.
in a dark room.
Yeah.
And then I could almost hear like a whisper in the room, and
Oh,
I was really starting, and I felt cold,
yeah.
and I really started to like starting to freak out at that point. But I had been, you know, obviously I know the truth, and I know this power in Jesus' name, so I'm like rebuking the spirit in my room in Jesus' name. And as I do that, I get this warmth that goes over me, like basically started from like the top of my head and goes all, and like slowly went all the way down my body. And
Wow.
and that sounds like a good thing, but it almost freaked me out even more because it made it more real, because like I knew that guy wasn't making any of this stuff up. Obviously, I had no reason to. I'm like, I could it was more freaky because it was like the whole thing. Like I'm not just imagining this. This is really happening.
Yeah.
And so as I was doing that, I was continuing to pray in Jesus' name. And I remember earlier in the week, I was like doing something in my closet, and I found this like little cross. Like they were giving it away. They were giving these little crosses away at church for whatever reason. I don't know if like maybe a reminder. And I felt like really compelled to just go get that. And I remember I got it, and I held it in my hand, and I was kind of like trying to sleep. But then I really couldn't sleep. So like everybody kind of does, I grabbed my phone at one point, I started scrolling. And I remember, I probably looked at stuff I probably should on Instagram, so the algorithm kind of puts certain things in your feed.
It puts evil in your face right there.
Right. So at one point, but before that, I kind of deleted a bunch of stuff. Like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. So I started following all these kind of Christian accounts. And it was interesting that I scrolled like one time and I saw it was a Bible app. And it said, it was like a highlighted Bible passage that was Psalm 23. And it was like, though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. And I was like, oh my God, like that was like literally what I was seeing then. I'm getting the chills, like just even thinking about that. And so long story short, I finally go to sleep. And the next day I'm like, oh my gosh, that was intense. This is crazy. So my young daughter was talking to my now ex-wife, and she was talking about how she was having a scary dream. And I was like, wait, what? Tell me about your dream. And so this is the same night. This is like the same night she had the dream. It was a dream that a fairy entered her room, and except it was like looked like a normal fairy, and then it's all of a sudden it got these really long claws and these long fangs. And she was saying like she couldn't remember if she was actually dreaming or if she was just still awake and she couldn't move. Yep. And this was the same night that happened to me,
brother.
And
you guys were under spiritual attack, brother. Was there any spiritual or any sleep paralysis involved with this? Could she move? Could you move?
Well, I could move, but she was acting like, that's what she was describing, that she couldn't really tell if she was sleeping or not sleeping. And wow. Yeah, I think she was saying she couldn't move. And the freaky thing was, I grew up with having two daughters, and or she grew up, I got like two daughters, and we have like all the Disney stuff. And I remember my one neighbor bought her this thing called a fairy door. And it was like this little toy door, and it was like stuck up against her wall. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like, it's like, it sounds crazy to say that, is that really a gateway? But is that kind of like giving consent to this thing to come and enter your room? So long story short, that happened. I told my brother about some stuff about that. And the cool thing was, like, we were saying, like, that you don't really kind of count on, maybe doing this one day. But I told my brother had many spiritual, like, kind of spiritual warfare encounters. And he was telling one of his friends, and he told my brother, he said, wow, it sounds like the enemy's worried, like God's raising up a warrior. And I remember at that point in my life, I was just like, who, me? Like, why me? But it was really cool to think that he planted that seed in me of like, that I like had, like, I'm here now, like that I would never have considered that I could do anything like I'm doing now. And I think that's very cool, because I did think, like what you were saying, like this was like, I think my brother's friend was right. It was like, the enemy saw that God was going to use me.
Yep. He's
going to try to snuff this out early. You think about even like biblically, right when Jesus is starting his ministry, that's when Satan goes to attack him. Like, like literally right before he's about to do all the things he's going to do, tries to derail you, tries to scare you, tries to tempt you in the ways that you could be tempted. But yeah, praise God. Obviously God had other plans, and it was really cool.
It sounds I'll go to you, Outcast, in a second. I just want to toss this in there. JT, it sounds like you became a red flag, and because of your faith growing. Now, Outcast, what do you think about that? The Disney portal that the friend bought for the daughter. Well, they bought a portal.
The Black Mirrors, which are our phones, all these things. It may seem strange to somebody listening in that doesn't get where we're coming from, but it's almost like these things are symbolic, and they create openings into the unseen realms that are surrounding us. We're kind of stuck in this 3D simulation, for lack of a better description, surrounded by angelic hosts and demonic hosts trying to pull us into either direction, or keep us on track, or pull us to our demise. And all these pagan things, they seem to maybe have, I want to say maybe, I think that symbolically they hold something which creates doorways. JT, I want to tell you too, just to add in, and we've told it on the show many times before, but 3 years ago when we were first on this journey and we started dedicating the episodes to God and inviting him into the podcast, it wasn't just Jesse and I. It was like regular listeners, our friend Laura, several other people were all having these dreams, and these dreams had a common theme. A lot of times something would appear that seemed kind of attractive, and then it would turn scary. And even my pastor's wife told us recently, or around the same time, she said, yeah, I had this crazy dream that there was this. It was funny she was saying this because, she's the pastor's wife, but there was this handsome man in my room, and he was just standing there in this dream. And then all of a sudden he became more menacing and more scary. And it was just like, well, mine was a feminine one, and and then for your daughter, it was a fairy. It was something cute, like a fairy. It appears as something warm and inviting. And then it turns dark. It reveals itself. To your point too, they're trying to intimidate us because that's all they have is tricks. Jesse and I've been binging a podcast, and if you haven't heard it, JT, I really recommend listening to The Exorcist files, and it's true stories from a famous exorcist, a priest.
Yeah, Carlos Martins.
Lots of really good data in there, but reoccurring. I mean, there's these. Yeah, it all kind of correlates. I see a correlation with all this stuff. It all fits in together rather clearly. So anyways, just want to add that in. We went through something similar. Like Jesse was raised with religion. I was too, but we weren't really, our hearts weren't fully committed to it. And then once we did, the dark side sees you as a threat. And I love that point you just made, JT, about how the devil didn't start harassing Jesus until he started his ministry. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an amazing point. I didn't mean to go off on a tirade, you guys. I know we got a lot to talk about.
No, but it's the cool thing about it was that, again, that what the devil intended for evil, God is going to use for good, is that part of me was like, so I was finding out about the spiritual realm, and it was almost like the knowledge that there was a spiritual dimension to these things that I couldn't see. And I was waking up to it. It was like it decided, well, you think you have no idea. Like you think you're freaked out that they're influencing the Beatles, but what if I could tell you I'm influencing you and I'm in your room right now? And I feel like that's kind of what it was doing. And but in the same way that I started to really be fascinated with like the code and well, how did these entities get in my house in the first place? And I thought that's really kind of what's maybe started with like my exposure of this kind of stuff was like, well, I need to figure out how I gave access to my home to these entities. It could be through some kind of sin act. It could be through all kinds of things that I've done that I thought were okay. Well, just again, like you're walking this line of like, well, I'm going to cross it every now and then. It's not a big deal. God forgives me, so I'm just going to say I'm sorry. Understanding like that maybe that was consent to this, and like it's one thing when you think, oh, well, I can just say I'm sorry later, but it's another thing. It was like, what if this is affecting my children now? Like, I mean, that's like that really is something to, as a father, you're like, oh wow, like I thought I'm only hurting myself, but what if I'm hurting my whole family by inviting like literally spirits of like discord in your house? And I think obviously I was going through a divorce at that time, and I couldn't help but think like how much of this is just feeding on this fear and this anxiety and all the bad stuff in my house. And and I realized at that point I was like, I can't, I can't give consent to these beings anymore, and I need to expose it. And praise God, I think He's given me the platform to do it now.
That makes so much sense. Amen to that. But it makes so much sense that you said that doors were open, and we don't realize we open these doors. It could be some childhood stuff that we don't know about. And so it's always smart to take time out and do some sort of prayer over the house, in the house, over the family, in the cars. I mean, because they will take advantage of anything that's open. And of course we run around here opening doors that we don't realize we opened, right? I know that some people is going to sound crazy, but that's just how it is. That's how they get into this place. That's why, red flags pop up. When you started showing interest, JT, guess what? That was a red flag. So all these red flags are jumping up, and these demons see it, and they know, and they'll come. What do you guys think demons are? That's their job, is to come harass us, because they want our soul. They don't want our soul going somewhere else. They want the soul coming with them. So there's an endless fight. It's a nonstop battle. Going back before we go to the next thing, I just want to say that the music and all these things, Sgt. Pepper's, that album that you're talking about from the Beatles, that's the one, because people were asking which one was it. So that was Sgt. Pepper's, and I think Rumbles talked about it too. Corey, Kore 333. Core 333, that whatever. She put that out there. He put that out there. It was Sergeant Pepper's. And I want to say too, CIA is always involved with that stuff, especially back in the 60s, in all this programming of our culture and all this programming of these musicians. So these musicians weren't just acting alone. They have influence from CIA, Crowley, all these different avenues. Laurel, what is that? Laurel Canyon out there in California. I mean, that's some crazy stuff that happened out there, and it never ends.
And since you mentioned that, Jesse, you're making me think of back in the 90s or 80s when we were kids, U2's Joshua Tree came out. And I thought, well, that's an unusual name for an album. I wonder what the deal is with Joshua Tree. I never heard any explanation ever. And then lo and behold, in the last several years, we've heard an account after account, even personal accounts from people we know who have had really strange encounters with other realms in Joshua Tree. So that's actually, obviously, it's some type of stronghold, a place of iniquity or something like that. There's something going on with it. And the fact that 30 some years ago, U2 put out a record called Josh. I don't know, something. It's just, there's too many coincidences. And I got a really strong suspicion that there's a hit making thing with the 3-letter agencies that are actually handing down these hits that are earworms that young people just grab onto, and they learn the lyrics, and then they're singing the choruses, which they're essentially chanting is what, it's all coming to focus. The older I get, I'm like, there's just too much going on.
Well,
here.
Everything makes sense. All these things are starting to, all these dots are making connections in lines, and making all these things connect. So, the deeper we get into these shows, and more that we talk to people like JT here, it solidifies what we're doing. Outcast is what I'm saying. All right, JT.
Yeah, I certainly believe that, like, especially with the music, you think about. It's funny when you think it's like a lot of the stuff from the 60s, it sounds like all this hippy dippy stuff. And I know that not everybody kind of knew what they were doing. Right. But when you actually pay attention to what they're saying, that they're talking about changing the world through their music. And you think about like who's influencing them to change the world. And then you got the drug culture at the same time. They're singing songs about revolution. And of course, some people are thinking political, but I think that obviously they're talking about ushering in a new age. They're talking about the age of Aquarius and all. And then you realize who's actually the Pied Piper, kind of like the Celeste Crowley message about do what thou wilt and do your own thing and all that stuff. And you're like, oh my gosh, like they weren't kidding when they were talking about changing the world. And and I think that, again, the 3-letter agencies who are connected with them too, that it's really blows your mind when you do see putting all these things together. And then you go back to like the demonic thing. I always talk about like the mythos of the vampire, and it's like the vampire can't come in your house unless he's invited in. Yeah. And it's like, to me, it's like, it's the exact same thing. It's like, oh, well, aren't you going to invite me in? Well, I can't come in unless I'm invited. They make a point to say that in every one of those movies. And like, once he's in there, he's not leaving.
Yeah. Got to boot him out. All right. So
blowing my mind.
Let's get this thing back on track. The show tonight is called Megalithic America. A lot of people, first of all, let's talk about megalithic. JT, what is that word? What does that mean? And how the heck does that stuff get in America, and how did it happen?
Well, yeah, that's the $1 million question, is like, how did it get here? I mean, I think that the main truth that I learned when I started researching like the old stuff, and it's funny because before I woke up spiritually, I started my very first dipping my toe into the conspiracy waters was watching shows like Ancient Aliens. Was okay. So what's up with the pyramids? And I think that it's funny how little we're taught about those in the school. Everybody obviously can in the picture in their mind the Giza Plateau and the 3 different pyramids, but we really don't understand how significant they are until we actually see like a person standing on one of the blocks. And you're like, oh man, I didn't realize the blocks were that big. Yeah. At first I thought like, oh, it's not really that impressive. I mean, of course, like what's naturally what you're going to build? You're going to build, if you're primitive, just stacking blocks up till you get to like a point at the top. But then when you find out like how exact they are, even though all the stones are different sizes and they're level, they're aligned with these constellations, Orion's belt. Okay, so now it starts to get a little bit weird. And then you find out, wait a minute, there's a lot more pyramids around the world. There's not just the ones in Egypt. Those are the only ones we were ever really taught about. Okay, there's a few in Mexico. Okay, well, it's not that. We haven't really established a pattern. That could be a coincidence. But then they're like China, they're in South America, they're in Russia, they're in the weirdest, they're everywhere. And so you start to say, like, okay, so who did this stuff and when? And the truth is, we don't really know. Now, the Egyptologists have a certain timeline, but of course they do. And they dismiss any evidence that contradicts that stuff, even though they find sites like Göbekli Tepe, and that's also a megalithic site. And I should say megalith means just almost like giant stone. It's like, so buildings, monuments, sun worship edifices that are giant stones.
Yeah, and they're not just random. These stones, giant stones, are actually put together and built. They create amazing structures. So
yes,
keep on going.
Yeah. So, anyways, so I started to be fascinated with that topic of like, okay, so who did it and how? And I think that biblically, it started to actually shake my faith a little bit, because I was like, wait a minute. So I didn't really buy the alien narrative, but I still said there needs to be answers for this stuff. Because like, if the Bible's talking about Adam being at this certain time, and obviously we have about a 6,000 year timeline based on the genealogies in the Bible. Okay, so who did this and when? And I started to really like kind of get nervous about that until I discovered Genesis 6. I discovered the stuff about before the flood, because in our almost like your Sunday school like understanding of the flood, it was about, well, people were really bad, and then there was a big boat, and then all the animals went on the boat with Noah, and then there was a big flood. But you're picturing people wearing animal skins and being very primitive before the flood, because we know everyone was primitive a long time ago. When biblically, actually that doesn't make any sense, because if people like Adam, who walked with God, lived 900 years, you could really only imagine how much knowledge was collected about the earth we live on and how it worked and all of the things before the flood. So then I started to understand, wait a minute, so if you go into like Genesis 6 and the book of Enoch, what if when the angels were giving man technology, and they're talking about giving them ability to work metal, stones, astrology, all the things, what if this was like some of the knowledge they gave them was the ability to build some of this stuff? Or if it wasn't the people, what if it was the offspring of the angels, the Nephilim, the giants? And then you start to actually look, if you actually look closer into the mythologies that the ancient angels or ancient aliens is quoting, they're saying, oh, well, these people are too primitive. They wouldn't know what an alien was if they saw one. So they just called them gods. Or maybe they weren't giants per se, but they were intellectual giants. It's like, no, actually, they were talking about gods and giants. The sons of God were likely who they were talking about. They were talking about the Watchers when they talked about the gods who they worshipped, or they worshipped their offspring, which would be demigods, like Greek mythology, Hercules, Achilles, Apollo, all these beings that were part God, part man. And again, all around the world, there's mythologies of an ancient flood that destroyed wicked giants. And the people, like most of these people who came afterwards that even are credited with building these things, don't take credit for building all the craziest structures. They say, people before did this. The ancient ones did this. Giants did this. Corrupt ones. And so, so then you get into America. There's evidence that stuff's here too. Not as much of it, but there is evidence that it's in North America as well.
It's wild, and people don't realize. I don't think many people realize that it's here. It's here in the United States. We have the American Stonehenge. We can go into all this stuff before we make it to the West. But Outcast, about the one in Ohio, right? The Serpent Mound.
The Serpent Mound. Yeah, there's a bunch. The whole Ohio Valley is just loaded with mounds, and the mounds were also set up to align with the celestial stars as well. The celestial alignment. So, JT, I want to tell you, it was what you explained is verbatim what happened to me. I was a customer of mine showed me Paracas, Peru, and these different structures around the world that nobody can explain. And I was looking at it, and my mind went to ancient aliens. I was like, nah, as a Christian, I don't like alien. I don't like the ancient alien concept. Something's missing. I knew something was off. And I prayed and I asked specifically for revelations or revealing. And then piece by piece, I got turned on to the Genesis 6 narrative, and it just made more sense than anything else I've ever heard. It just started to all click together. For the fun of it, I want to tell you, JT, we're talking about some spots in Michigan. Near Bay City, Michigan, there is an island called Skull Island, and according to local lore, they found giant skulls on Skull Island. And since then, it is completely fenced off, and the Department of Natural Resources will not let you visit Skull Island anymore. And that's just right here in Michigan.
Is there any possibility that's where they got like the part of the King Kong story? Isn't that literally where
Maybe. I didn't even think about that. Could be.
Skull Island, yeah.
Yep. Outcast, also the stuff that's underwater here in our Great Lakes. Look at that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that people don't know about. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? What's underwater there?
So just because JT knows so much, and we were talking about it last night. I guess we'll share it with our listeners. They have discovered a Stonehenge type structure under Lake Michigan. They won't tell you the exact coordinates because they don't want people going and messing with it. And I believe that there's actually some of the stones have some fairly ornate carvings on them as well. Yep. According to some legend and lore too, there's an island up in northern Michigan, and it's called Isle Royale, and it's believed, for people who think like us, it is believed to be the copper mines for the royalty of the giants. So imagine a pre-flood world where it's not Lake Michigan, but it's a giant river, Michigan, and it's the waterways that they use to move the copper. According to some people, the bodies, the giants that were exhumed in the burial mounds had copper armor, copper axes, copper helmets, and they were 98% purity, and that comes from one place in the whole world, and that is northern Michigan. So you've got Skull Island, the legend that there were giant skulls there. You've got Isle Royale, which is where the copper mines were. You've got now a Stonehenge in Lake Michigan. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm having a hard time finding information on it, but I could swear I heard that they found a stone circle in Lake Superior. Is that the tip of the thumb, Jesse? Is that where Lake Superior is?
Yeah.
It's a very shallow
tip
lake.
Of the what? Tip of the what?
Tip of the thumb of Michigan.
No, that's Huron.
Sorry. Yeah. So Huron's a particularly shallow lake. There's supposedly stone circles there. Near the tip of the thumb is Sebawang.
Port Austin.
And there Austin's there too. There's petroglyphs, which are carvings on stones that they've denied access to people to go to anymore, but they say that they don't match any Native American carvings anywhere on the planet. They are extremely unique to just that part of Michigan. Then at the very top of the Upper Peninsula, you've got a dolmen, Dolman. If you want to do your own research on that, anybody out there listening, dolmens are all over Europe. They're attributed to the Celts and the Druids, although nobody can tell you how they created them, because you'll have a gigantic boulder sitting on smaller boulders. There's a lot of corny hypothesis of how they would have done it, like mounded up dirt and then move the rock and then move the dirt away. I don't buy it. But anyways, they're considered Celtic, yet there is a dolmen that's documented in northern Michigan too. So anyways, just throwing that out there. They say that the Mississippi, which is Lake Michigan, is a swollen section of the Mississippi, goes right to St. Louis, and they say that St. Louis was a giant series of mounds, and they leveled it. They knocked all those mounds down to build St. Louis. My greater point is the United States is steeped with this stuff too. I've also heard some legend and lore that in southern Florida, the Everglades of Florida, people have come across Mayan type ruins, but there's no documentation of it anywhere. People say that you were seeing things, you were delusional when you saw it, you were hallucinating. I mean, I've heard all kinds of explanations why people say that you didn't see what you saw there in the Everglades, but it totally makes sense that there was probably a very advanced civilization pre-flood, or even possibly post-flood too, but pre-flood world, where these structures like the pyramids down in South America came all the way up, and they translated into mounds in North America as opposed to stone structures. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent. You guys sharing what I've.
It's all good. It's all good, brother.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
No worries. No, I was going to say, what's interesting about when you mentioned those mounds, and so I've always wondered this too. Now that the more I've done research in this, like when you hear about the Serpent Mound, and if you guys haven't seen that in Ohio, it literally is like this mound. I don't know how big it is, but I mean, it's pretty big, and it goes for a long way. And obviously it's not natural. And even they don't say it's natural, but what they just try to say it is like everything else that they find in the ancient world was, it was this burial thing. But was it? I mean, we really don't know what it was because it's under the ground, and they won't let you dig up what it was. So I'm starting to wonder at some of the mounds, were they more than just mounds? Are they megalithic structures under the mounds? They're not literally just piles of dirt, I don't think. I mean, if you look at what's crazy is when you actually go look up what the pyramids in Mexico look like, before they excavated them. Like I think it was like there's a famous one is the Temple to the Sun, I think in Mexico. I think that's kind of near Cancun. I'm not exactly sure what part of it. And even the other one, the real famous step pyramid, the one looks just like a hill. It was 100% covered, had grass, trees, and everything growing on it. And the temple to I think the step pyramid had only the top was showing. So is it possible that some of these things that are mounds, are they just buried pyramids, or they're buried megaliths that are under here, and they're more than just what they say that they are? Because again, it doesn't fit the timeline if there was pyramids here. Even though to me it's like, why is it hard to imagine that there was pyramids here when there's pyramids just down the way in Mexico? I mean, it's like, obviously it's one big landmass. It's like, it doesn't, to me, I don't know why that messes up their narrative too much, but it does.
Yeah, it does, because, if anybody out there watches the Revisionist History channel, which I like to call it, they put a lot of truths out there, but within those truths, there's a lot of false doctrine, things that you can tell they don't go into biblical scripture. Okay. Because it's completely missing that stuff. So if they would plug in some of this biblical scripture, well, they might have a better compelling story. But instead, they, of course, these channels, we can't trust these channels because of the ownership and what they can and can't say, right? Of course, I'm just a big conspiracy theorist, but I've been right most of the time. So anyway, JT, let's get back to I don't know. Should we start heading west? Arizona, should we start heading west to what these national parks are? What's in these national parks? What's under everything? What's under you right now? What's under us here in Detroit right now? I mean, anything's open, brother. I enjoy this stuff, and I think most people do too.
Yeah, like I said, I was telling you guys last night, I guess the more I've woke up spiritually, I remember I started doing videos about the Hoover Dam. And so as I did, I was doing research around the Hoover Dam, Lake Mead, all the things. And the thing that was crazy to me was, like, I learned that there was ancient cities that were submerged after they created the Hoover Dam, and Lake Mead, like, literally, like, big cities. Like, I mean, when I say cities were submerged, like, I'm not kidding. There's a people that are known out west, or there was a people, and they were known as the Anasazi. And so I thought, okay, that's a tribe of Indians in the West. Well, the Hopi and I think the Pueblo claim to be related to them. But when I actually learned what Anasazi meant, all it meant was ancient ones. And I was like, okay, so they really don't know much about it. They know they lived here about 1,000 years ago, and they're credited with all kinds. I want to say that over 500 structures are credited to the Anasazi, which again is not really it's more of a description of people who lived a long time ago and what were the structures like. But what I found interesting is under Lake Mead, they said that some of the structures had over 100 rooms in them. Over 100 rooms. I mean, so now you're not. So what you're picturing probably is like some clay hut or something like that, like, kind of what you would think, what they could build 1,000 years ago. But 100 rooms? Yeah, you guys can look this up. This is actually on, I think, the lakemead.gov site. And so the more I started to look around there, I started to be interested in the stuff out west. And as a kid, my parents, we did a road trip to Lake Powell, which is very similar to Lake Mead. The limestone, just like, looks like a different world when you're at these places. It doesn't look, I mean, especially because I'm from Virginia, flatlander, just, I'm noticed seeing green farmland type stuff. And then I started to go, I went out to Arizona, I went to Sedona, saw some crazy stuff. And the more I started to look at stuff, I was like, you know what? This stuff looks like it was melted at some point. Like, I don't even know what happened. It looked like a cataclysm happened at some point. And I used to think it was in the ancient past, but now I'm not even sure. I think it might have been more recent. But point being is, you start to look out west, and obviously everybody talks about the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon which I would say is 90% of the Grand Canyon is off limits to the public.
Wonder why.
Well, I mean, the Grand Canyon is obviously massive. So, I mean, 90% of it is, it's unbelievable. And then you find out, like in the early 1900s, there's stories written. I think the Arizona Gazette mentioned that Egyptian artifacts were found in the Grand Canyon. Some guy named J.G. Kincaid, they even had like a second article about it. And then supposedly the Smithsonian said, no, there's nothing to see here. There's no ancient Egyptian or Hindu stuff in here. That was just like, that's a big hoax. Even though the paper never wrote about it being a hoax, never acted like it was a hoax.
Yeah.
And then you find out the rock formations in the Grand Canyon are called the Temple of Isis, the Temple of Osiris, the Temple of Shiva, the Tower of Ra, the Temple of Solomon. And then you go there and you're like, those places look like temples. I mean, they look like maybe they were temples at some point. And some of them look like they have entrances you could go inside of them. But obviously that's part of the Grand Canyon that's off limits to the public. And the normies will say, oh, well, they just don't want anyone to get hurt. There's people who die or go missing in national parks every day, 365.
Yep.
So like why they would make these stipulations there. Yeah, look at those things. We went there this past year. And yeah, somebody trying to tell me the Colorado River did that. It doesn't look like water did that. It almost looks like it looks scorched to me. It looks ruined. I mean, those look like ruins to me. They don't look like natural rock formations.
Wow.
There's so much about these natural or national parks. First of all, man, look at that. Look at that one right there. I'll see if I can make this bigger. This is, all right, you guys, Quora.com.
Yeah, they'll be like, no, that's false.
Yeah.
So obviously you'll have somebody who's connected with three-letter agencies. No, there's nothing to see there.
I'm just trying to pull up this picture and it won't let me. Anyway, look at that carving right there. Buddha stuff, Buddha statues, all these kind of things. So,
well, some of those could be fake, and I think sometimes, like especially when you look up at giant stuff, I think like my buddy Brian Demon Racers has said this, and I agree with him. That I think that there's so many fake pictures out there, and it's almost designed to like flood it with very obviously fake stuff. So you'll say, yeah, that's been debunked. That's not real. But no, there's depictions of the things. But yeah, what the article described was Egyptian artifacts and something that sounded more like Hindu to me, almost like Far Eastern type stuff, where it almost may be a combination of the two. And there was like hundreds of mummies found in one of these caves and stuff like that. I mean, but again, I don't think it sounds too crazy to me to think that if there's pyramids in South America, there's pyramids in North America, there's pyramids everywhere, then, I mean, again, what we're taught is 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Before then, they couldn't cross the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. Even though there's stuff on Easter Island, when you find out how remote that place is, there's megaliths there too. So how did people get there?
Yeah.
I mean, if you could build a megalith like the Great Pyramid, I believe you could build a boat as well. So
yep. For sure.
I think there obviously was intercontinental travel. I don't believe that stupid story about people walked from Asia down some land bridge and then just decided to stop. And you think about like that, the migration story of the peoples. Like they say people walk from Asia, right, across like the Bering Strait over across Alaska, and then they walked all the way down to South America. Meanwhile, you think, wouldn't there be a lot more people in North America if that's what they did? Because there's a lot of nice parts of like maybe the West Coast. Maybe they would stop more in Canada. But that's what we're taught. So like I think obviously it seems very obvious to me that people were never stupid. Again, like biblically, the people before the flood would have been really smart, very corrupt, smart. After the flood, seemed like they picked up right where they left off, Tower of Babel, all the things.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's lots of evidence that ancient cultures, empires were very smart.
Yeah,
again, it's all a lie.
The rewriting of history is what drives me the most crazy. And even on top of that most people, because we go through this school system in our media, in our, our complete education program, these are just normal things. Normal. that they say, hey, we're born into this, JT. We're born into this way of thinking. We're born into this realm, and not a lot of people think outside of it. What happened before? I mean, of course, I believe they were way smarter. I think they had better technology back then. I think they were more advanced back then. We're talking about angels, fallen angels. I mean, these things were not smart or not dumb. They were very smart, very intelligent, they knew everything, right? They still do. They still do know everything, Outcast. That's how they can get into to our lives. So it's like, it's a never ending battle. I said it earlier in the show. It's a never ending battle because they will never stop until they are stopped.
JT, is it your conclusion, or I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just thinking out loud because we think similar, but would you agree with the idea that they are hiding this because it all points to the Bible being true and they need us to be ignorant to the battle we're in?
I could say that, I would say that I agree with that. I would say that there's a million reasons why they lie, but I think that, to me, I feel like that the more research I've done, the history we've been taught is very recent history. The story that they've concocted is recent. And if you think about like the founding of like the modern school system, like the Rockefeller school system, I think the robber barons are credited with almost everything, every great invention in the last couple hundred years. Very convenient, right? That they're also the ones who basically started these schools. So I think that, to me, it gives credit to certain people. Obviously, people talk about the secret societies like the Freemasons. Oh, the Freemasons built all this stuff. No, they didn't. There's no evidence of that. Like, you know what I mean? Like when it really comes down to it, there's evidence of secret societies, but what's the evidence of them actually building any of these great buildings? So there's stuff in our recent past, and it's the story to me is a lot of the same ways of, it's obviously about centralizing power. It's about monetizing things that might've been free not that long ago. Isn't it interesting? We're taught like the Native Americans didn't believe in like land, like selling land, even though we're told that they sold the island of Manhattan for some beads. Go look that up. That's what they told us in school. It's like, that's so stupid. That makes no sense on so many levels.
Yep.
Because even if they didn't believe in monetizing the land, right? How much would you'd still need to give me something to get up my whole family, my tribe, and all of the things, and go walk someplace, right? So it's, so a lot of those stories we're told about America just make no sense. But if you think about, if there was a time where the land was free, there's tons of land in America. Like, can you imagine if you didn't have to buy your plot of land? Maybe if you could just build your own house, you didn't get taxed on the things you did. And I think it's interesting when you think about the robber barons, they control the modern medical system, the school system, the energy. So if they had the banking system, so they've managed to monetize like everything to keep us obviously in slavery, basically.
Yeah.
Free range slaves. And so ultimately, I believe that Jesus being the truth, it all ends up pointing back to him. But I think that at the end of the day, like, they don't want anybody to think outside the box, because the box is where we're chained up at.
Yeah, for sure. Going back to, you were talking about the national forest and national parks and all that. Do you know, JT, that constitutionally we're not supposed to have national parks? The only thing we should be having is state parks. The national parks is an infringement on the state's right. Okay. Those, that was, what's his name started that? Teddy
FDR?
Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt
FDR.
started that. Yeah.
Teddy, yeah.
That should have never happened. There should only be state parks. Okay. What makes you think, or where my head goes is, I'm thinking that, of course, they're going to make these things off limits and give us a little, just like Antarctica. Yeah, you can go to 66 parallel and visit that town and, pick up some ice and look at those cute penguins over there. Same thing with these national forests. Hey, you can go into this fenced area, take some pictures, ride a mule down there, go pick some rocks and act like you're, sifting gold, but you're not going to go back in there. There's things there you can't see. And these kind of things, I believe that's back there. They found giant remains. They found red-headed 12-foot giant remains. They find tunnel systems. They find caves. What else are they finding back there? I mean, it's endless. And why can't we go there? Yeah, we're the land of the free, right? But
Right.
the federal
Well,
government
supposedly.
owns property that should be given to the state or state owned. No, there's something wrong there. National parks should not exist. There's no constitutional authority for that. It's only
Well, there's a
state
lot
parks.
there's a lot of human disappearances in those places. There's a ton of cryptid sightings as well as UFO sightings in those same places. So it's ironic that it's not ironic, but it's quite coincidental that those are the places that they've deemed that you cannot build or explore on. You can only visit for brief periods of time if you come out alive. But yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't want to go down a Bigfoot rabbit hole, but when I ponder like what would be their motive for denying the existence or not wanting to look at any evidence, because I know they've got hair samples, they've got other samples, they don't want to look at it because I think that it's going to come back with exotic DNA. I think that they're chimera probably.
Yep.
I don't want to say they're Nephilim. I want to say that they're genetic animal hybrids, maybe that are leftovers from when the fallen angels were experimenting with on humans, and they don't want that getting out because if somebody says, "Well, I got this hair sample, let's have a close look at it," they're going to go, "So did it come back primate? Is it a giant orangutan? What is it?" And they're going to go, "Well, it's not really that. What is it?" Well, we don't really want to talk about what we, because it's going to lead you right back to the Bible, and
Yes.
and when you're in Satan's matrix, they don't want you looking at the Bible. They want you to think it's a fairy tale, a moral fairy tale. Sorry, I went off on a tangent. I apologize, guys.
And to pick, piggyback on that, Outcast, the American Indians told us that they weren't the first ones here. They were fighting other things that were here.
Right.
Why doesn't our school system, why doesn't our government, why doesn't Revisionist History Channel tell us that? We can get it directly from these tribes and these American Indians. They tell us that. Are we not to believe them?
Yeah, well, I agree. That I think. Well, again, if you think about what we're talking about, when they came up with the theory of evolution, that they established a certain kind of timeline, and I think that's why we're taught about dinosaurs, because whether you believe in dinosaurs like they're taught or not, what the dinosaurs really are, they're a story. They're like a placeholder, to push the evolutionary timeline way back, and then of course evolution works like this, right? Some kind of progress this way. Well, it doesn't really make sense if there's all these dips and backs and forths, and then obviously where does a giant fit in there? Where does Bigfoot fit in here? It doesn't. And so like that, where does it? It doesn't make sense when you find out man was way more advanced at a certain point, and then they were dumb here, and then they would have to answer for that. And obviously, you could talk about biblical judgment and things like that. That it's like that certain mythologies are called myth in the way that it's a completely made up story, even though the ancients would never consider myths completely fiction. I think even like obviously again, people not being stupid at any point in history, I believe there was resets, and I think that there was times where obviously people have been kept in the dark, like literally, and they don't understand some of our history, and so they have an ignorance about it. But people are smart, and I think that understanding like when you hear mythology, like I hear it now, and I'm like, I know that came probably likely from a very true story. Now, I don't believe that the story is a fact, but it came from, like when you see the echoes of these stories being very similar all around the whole world, it's because it's all one story and it from different perspectives. And so that they would try to like the whole thing, like basically like, okay, so what is a dinosaur? Could it be a dragon? Yeah, it could very likely be a dragon.
Yep.
It could be actually giant human bones that are, you find one bone. Could it be a giant humanoid or was it a giant reptile or bird or whatever?
Hey,
The point is that they don't want you to even consider that some of the mythologies could be true, because again, that actually takes you outside their, the very linear thinking they're trying to put you into, where everything has to have this scientific, rational explanation. When this is the truth of the matter is that this world is very complex. It's beyond us. We don't know everything's here. There's things probably inside the earth that obviously would would peel your eyelids back if you ever even considered, like, I mean, how like the chills you would get just by like what we don't even know about
mm-hmm.
that is here. I'm not talking about outer space and all the weird stuff they show you in the movies, but there's things that we just don't know about, and if you ever get in a car, you go or get in a plane, you drive out west, and then you like just say like Florida, for example. You drive to like the Everglades. Could you even imagine what's in there? Like, how could you even know what's in there? Like,
Yeah.
like you have like the skunk ape and all the weird terms for like the wild man or whatever mythologies around the whole world about this kind of humanoid giant thing. It's everywhere. Like,
Yep.
I mean, so do you think that everybody's making up this story collectively? It makes no sense.
No, what it does is just like Jack Pine Savage there. He said again, they don't like stuff that leads back to the Bible, and all these things they do lead back to the Bible. The most supernatural book in the world is the Bible. Where do you think Hollywood gets all their ideas from? They take those and they flip them upside down and give us the inverted version of it. All right, they're turning heroes into villains and villains into heroes. So they're completely messing with the conscience of humanity. I believe that's their job. Going back to what we can't find or what we can't look at. I'm guessing there's lost cities. The growth that you're talking about over some of these structures down there in Florida, Outcast, that look like the Mexican, the Mayan temples and all that. They'll just allow these things to be grown over. Sometimes they'll fill sand and dirt over them because they don't want us to know something about the past that was there before they came in and gave us a new past.
Mm-hmm.
Does that stuff make sense?
Yeah, for sure. You even think about it, like that's why like you can find pyramids in Egypt because it's a desert. There's no growth over top of the things. And then there's all around the whole world where there's green things. It obviously the earth consumes things that are not taken care of. But of course, that's interesting when we talking about like if you guys ever looked into like the Tartaria stuff, the old world mud flood stuff. You find out there's buried stuff everywhere around the whole world. And I said again, I mentioned Easter Island. It's funny to me that watching shows like the History Channel and Ancient Aliens, and they talk about the Moai statues and how mysterious they are and they're weird, and they make a point to say these weird faces. And it wasn't that long ago. I'm not even sure what year it was, but they're saying, guess what? These things have bodies.
Yes.
So they dig down, and some of the bodies are dug down like 20 feet. And so how did these things get buried? And then you consider like if those things are buried 20 feet deep, there's evidence in modern cities of things being buried like halfway up, like up to 6 feet, sometimes 15 feet under the ground. Like it's like there's evidence of buried things everywhere. Yeah, look at that. I mean, like that's unbelievable. It's crazy. Again, I know we talked a little bit about it. Some of the biblical locations, like you ever looked up the excavations of Sardis in the Bible? Remember Sardis from the Book of Revelation?
Mm-mm.
So one of the churches Jesus gives a warning to. There's a crazy picture. See if you can look up the picture of that. It's like there's this column that's about 20 feet tall and is completely under the ground, and somebody's standing next to it. I think there's a famous gate in Iraq that has like kind of like those cherub looking things with like the long beards. It's about 25 feet tall. In 1850, they're digging it out, and it's 100% covered under the ground.
Yeah,
so there's a world under the ground.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
and what's funny is as kids we were kind of led to believe that time, blowing sand, and time and space dust is burying us, but it wouldn't be like that. It's not. I mean, you look at Göbekli Tepe, and I mean everything's completely underground. I mean, they have to completely dig it out to see it, and what we're supposed to believe that it goes back, when you go back thousands of years, there's that much dust and dirt flowing. You're right. It's something doesn't seem to make sense. Something's really
I know you're
off.
probably not going to see this too great, but like this is the one I was talking about. Can you guys kind of see that?
A little bit.
Text it to me.
Screen.
Text it to me if you can.
Yeah, I'll text you this picture.
Is that the Artemis at Sardis, or which one is that?
Oh no, so Artemis was would be in the Artemis Temple is in Ephesus.
Okay.
Let me see.
Yeah, if you could send me that, I'll look at that one. You guys, there's so much stuff here. Musical Lover says she's heard that they're trying to stop and rebury Göbekli Tepe. Yeah, I wonder why.
I haven't heard. I have not heard that yet. Jeez.
Well, wasn't our friend in Dr. Laura there, Outcast? Wasn't she there a few times? I go back, or at least once. I thought she
Yeah,
visited there.
possibly. That's in is it not in near Turkey?
Yeah, it's in
Yeah.
Turkey. There's all kinds. Well, what's crazy is that that's where all the cities are and the churches are in Revelation. They're all in Turkey too. Those are the 7 churches in Asia are in Turkey. And so the crazy part about like lots of that stuff is, for example, Göbekli Tepe. I believe they say that about 5% of it's been excavated, and they're trying to make them stop. To me, I think that again, like that, if we have an idea of what it looks like, I mean, I would say obviously I'd like to see what more of it looks like. But at the same time, I find their story about how it was buried comical. That they say that somebody buried their own temple, and I was like, well, just think. Okay, let's just think about that for a second. Let's talk about that. Okay, so if I told one of you guys to bury your house, there's an army coming, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, that sounds stupid because obviously you're going to ruin your house so somebody else doesn't ruin it. Secondly, if you did that, you would have a big mound there, right? It would look somewhat like a pyramid or a mound. And then I was like, okay, but now I want you to even it out. So you're going to have to bury the rest of the neighborhood too. Now I want it even though. And so that's what they have because Göbekli Tepe is not under a big mound like we were talking about, like the serpent mounds. It's literally buried under the ground. And then I said, there's evidence of things being buried under the ground everywhere. So why should this place be any different? Somebody told me it was different sand. Like, how could you even know? Like what? They were saying it was different type of dirt from some other place. And I was like, no, show me examples of people burying their own stuff like that. Yeah, look at that. So that's also in Turkey. And that's obviously way more recent than Göbekli Tepe.
That's crazy.
Well,
You guys,
I mean, if
look
I
at the
may
screen.
just add just quickly too, if you listen to 1800s expeditions of Egypt, it was the same way. Egypt was like the Sphinx was buried up to its head. I mean, everything was almost similar to this. I mean, Egypt was almost completely buried in the 1800s when they started excavating.
Well, but a lot of people would say that they would think Egypt being older than like Rome, and you'd be correct. But at the same time, there's all these ancient empires basically took over Egypt at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The crazy thing is that what I don't think most people realize is, like, again, so that's Sardis, and obviously the Romans built that stuff. And
right.
You think about like that the Roman stuff needs to be excavated. I don't think people realize when you see early pictures of the Colosseum, there's dirt everywhere around it. They had to dig it up.
My daughter, my daughter was just there, 3-4 weeks ago. And I had her take so many pictures of everything there. But yeah, you're right. She saw the evidence of that too.
So I think that's the one thing people don't know is like you see old stuff and like a lot of it's recreations. Even like, so you were talking about like another Stonehenge. Well, there's pictures of Stonehenge being put back together. There's pictures of Egyptian stuff being put back together. There's pictures of all these old ancient cities being like, it's like the blocks being kind of repositioned and put. There's evidence of that everywhere. Mm-hmm. So the real question is, how did all this stuff get buried like this? And I mean, to me, I think there's no example. I mean, there's nothing like this. When I see that God said judgment was coming to this city, and I see it look like that, there's examples of like even in I think it's Matthew chapter 11 when Jesus is saying, "Woe to the unrepentant cities," like Capernaum, Bethsaida, was it Chorazin? And we did a podcast about that one time, and it was like we looked it up, and all those cities were like they were buried at one point, and then when they dug stuff up, they were melted and destroyed stuff they found.
So melted. Let's talk about that. You said these cities were melted. What does that mean? What does that mean? Because a lot of people don't understand what you're saying, especially when you look at the melted rocks that look melted. These aren't things that are just placed because you figured out a way to balance something, you guys. He's talking about things that look like they've been melted into place with these lines. I mean, feats of engineering that we can't do right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I would say that. I mean, biblically, obviously, the day of the Lord is described as like it's a day of intense heat, fervent heat, and things are going to be melted. The mountains will melt like wax on the day of the Lord. That's what the Bible says. And so you see examples of biblical judgment. Actually, there's a really good example, and I think Ezekiel chapter 30, it talks about the day of the Lord coming to Egypt. And it mentions one place in particular is really, really cool example of this. It's called, the town's called Zoan. And a lot of people believe that is actually what the Egyptians would have called Tanis. And at some point was the capital of their of their empire. Well, the day of the Lord's described as coming there, and it's going to burn like fervent heat there. And if you look up pictures of that, if you get a second, look up Tanis in Egypt, or you can call it Zoan, Zoan, and there's like a megalithic foot, like part of a statue that's completely just only the foot's left. There's megaliths, literally looks like a child just knocked his blocks off everywhere. But all the things are really big. There's like a sphinx looking thing that's scorched. It looks like the judgment of God came there, and I believe it did because God said it was going to happen. And you wonder like what kind of army could do that to that without it literally being an act of God.
You know, hold on one second. I'm going to switch over, but you said that is Zoan in Egypt, right?
Yeah, Zoan, or it's called Tanis. It might be the
Well,
I looked up Zoan Tanis both, and it came up. Lots of images, Jesse.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Is this the one you saw right here? You see this guy laying down?
You see like how big this massive statues, and if you actually can see, like there's one where there's like a foot.
I see it. The foot is massive.
The foot is so big. It's like what's up with the rest of the statue? It's unbelievable.
Wow.
Look at that. Wow. All right, I'm gonna go look for the one with the foot. You guys,
but yeah, I just think that there's just so much here, and I think that without looking into like what the Bible says about some of these places, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
So, kind of switching gears a little bit, but when you look at Tartaria and the mud flood theories, where my brain goes a little bit, and this might sound silly, so correct me if you disagree, JT, but I kind of think like, do the controllers, those in control, have control of weather going way back into antiquity? And when Tartaria was providing free energy and everything else that people needed, it was a flourishing society. And they said, well, this has got to go because we want to monetize everything. Did they just unleash a mud flood? And has there been multiple mud floods? Has there been different ones at different times? Is it all God's judgment? Or do you think the controllers have some control over these things? I mean, I'm throwing out a lot of ideas. Where does your head, how do you sort this out in your mind?
No, those are great questions, because I think that's what we had to ask. I mean, I think that it wasn't until real recently that I was willing to accept that there was some kind of a reset in our not so recent past. And I think that if you guys have done it, you guys dug into this research, the camera was supposedly, from what we know, was invented like the early 1800s. And then we have some early pictures of these cities from like the 1850s that are very eerie. You see like pictures like St. Petersburg, cities in like Germany that are massive, and there's nobody in them. There's mud everywhere. It looks like something really bad must have happened there. And then, but the thing is, you have these grand cities and they're empty. And again, like that doesn't really match up with what we're taught about like our timelines and things. And so the real question is, was that an act of God, or was it an act of possibly, the devil and the sons of iniquity? I can't say for sure. I mean, I guess to me, it's like when you see the buried stuff around the whole realm, it kind of seems more to me like that had to be some kind of act of God, because it's like, I don't believe that I think some people give the controllers more credit than they deserve. I don't know what they can do. I think there's a lot of things they can do. But yeah, when you see it like on a level like that, I believe that seems more like an act of God. I mean, some people obviously in the space we're in, we're starting to consider if this is like the short season of Satan, is some of these things evidence that maybe we're on a different part of the timeline than we've been taught. Like everyone's looking for the return of Christ, but what if he returned in the first century when he was telling the apostles, before this generation passes away, all these things will be fulfilled. The book of Revelation says that do not seal up this prophecy because the time is at hand. John's saying he's in tribulation at the time he's writing the book. Again, like I said, the cities that are getting the warnings about where they're to come in the book of Revelation are all destroyed, buried under the ground. So it's kind of like if Jesus says this is about to happen and then you see evidence of it, it's like, what if this is the evidence? And wouldn't that be the all-time biggest conspiracy, is that some of this stuff is actually in our past and everyone's looking for this new, like the thing to come when, like they're looking for the millennial kingdom and maybe it came. Right. And then like the evidence is that the destroyed things are what's left of what it was, and we're in this time, and it's actually spoken about in Revelation chapter 20, is the devil is bound for 1,000 years, and then he's allowed out after the 1,000 years to deceive the nations, gather them together. They surround the camp of the saints. Fire pours down from heaven. Gog and Magog, the big battle. And it's like there's a big battle before the millennial reign, and there's a big battle afterwards. And maybe we're in that time. And some people speculate that maybe the mud flood corresponded with the loosing of Satan. I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's like I said, it's hard to tell because we're trying to piece together a history that's, we really don't believe.
So in your mind, where does that put us in the narrative? What are we looking? How do we need to look at this where we're at right now? Because this is new to me, by the way. So please elaborate.
I know
as much as you like.
Well, Well, just be patient with me because this is when I get called a heretic, because we say like we go back and we look at some of the things that Jesus said in the Gospels, and there's a lot of verses that have been explained away. Like, and I think when you're looking for everything to be in the future, you're willing to accept a lot of explanations. But like in Matthew 10:23, Jesus says, "You will not go around all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes." He says in Matthew 16:28, he says, "Some of you standing here will not taste death until the Son of Man comes into it. You see the Son of Man come into his kingdom." I think in John 1:51, I think he tells Nathanael, "You'll see heaven opened with angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man." And so he's saying all these things. And then he says in Matthew 24, he says that when they ask him about the destruction of the temple, the sign of your coming, and the end of the age, he gives them a list of all the things to look for. And then he says, "Truly, I tell you, all these things will be fulfilled before this generation passes away." He even tells Caiaphas, the high priest, that you'll see the Son of Man coming at the right hand of the Father with great power on the clouds. And that's when he tears his clothes, and that's when he kills him. You think about in Zechariah, it says, "Those who see him those who pierce him will see him, and they'll mourn." So if he came back in the first century, where he's like the Roman Jewish War was from 66 AD to 70 AD. And that is actually when you think about the Daniel prophecies about 1,260 days. Revelation 11 says that the Gentiles are given 42 months to trample the holy city. That's exactly the amount of time it took the Romans to destroy Jerusalem and burn the temple down. Exactly. And so I think that the judgment that they were talking about was then. And then I think later there was a judgment on the Roman Empire. And that's the part that gets a little more murky, because we don't even really know exactly when the Romans were, the funny thing about it, again, like history, is historians debate when the Roman Empire fell up to hundreds of years. So anyways,
really?
so that being said, if those events took place then, there's a lot of people who believe, and I'm one of them, that I think the timeline is this really the year 2024?
No.
I'm not sure if we could reasonably conclude that it is. Obviously that's what we've been taught,
right?
And some people will say they've added 1,000 years. Some people say they've taken out 1,000 years. I think that's a little too simplistic, but there's evidence from, I think there's this one guy named Fomenko. I think he's like a Russian guy who's done a lot of work through I guess the constellations and kind of like the Mazzaroth and dating things, saying that a lot of these historical events are like repeated things, almost like they've taken stories from certain places and spread our timeline out. And maybe that's more evidence that we are literally in the time where Satan has deceived the nations in order to, obviously, to deceive them, in order to literally have them attack the camp of God at some point.
Yeah, good thinking there. But something I want to talk about here too is you mentioned I forgot which one it was, ascending on the ladder. What was that? You just said that. Was that Jacob?
It was so in John, in the first chapter of John, remember when he calls Nathanael, he says, "I saw you when you're under the fig tree." And Nathanael's obviously blown away, and then he's like, "Oh, you think that?" And Jesus basically says, "Oh, you think that's something? You're going to see greater things than this. You're going to see heaven open, and you're going to see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. And so
Okay.
mhm.
Okay, yeah. So that brought something to me because I got this right here. Jacob's vow at Bethel, and this is Jacob 12, talking about
Mhm.
Jacob's ladder.
Yeah.
Then he
Mhm.
then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set on the earth, and its top reached to heaven, and there were angels of God were ascending and descending on that. To me,
Mhm.
there's something there that they're going back and forth on.
Mhm.
I mean, they're going through. They're coming through a different realm. That sounds awful
Sure.
lot like some sort of a portal.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of like how it's written and how it's described and with the all actuality. Obviously, I mean, people believe like the firmament is peeled back. I don't know what it means. All it just means I know that Jesus is describing something that's going to happen. Like comes from like the book of Daniel. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like that's like where those Daniel prophecies are about the Son of Man coming on the clouds.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I think that to me it's interesting, and I think that I'm we've been researching this a lot over the past year. What's interesting is if you guys have ever read Revelation chapter 20, you guys are probably like me that it's interesting. So the end of the Battle of Armageddon, the false prophet and the beast are thrown into the lake of fire, but then Satan is the one who's stuck in the pit, in the bottomless pit. And like to me, is always curious of like, why wouldn't God just throw that old serpent in the lake of fire too and just be done with it? Like it would be over. But for some reason, the devil's allowed to deceive the nations after that. And then I thought, well, how would he ever deceive the nations after the millennial reign? Like, it does not compute because I think we've been taught, like a lot of things in the Bible, before you ever read it, you had an idea of what it said. And so you're kind of reading that into the text because I think people think that there was going to be like a physical normal kingdom, like in Jerusalem, like the one we believe like Bibi Netanyahu's at. And if Jesus himself was sitting on a actual physical throne in Jerusalem, how would anyone be deceived? How would anyone be deceived to go take on the God King that's right there? Imagine Satan saying, "Hey, let's go fight Jesus." And you're like, no, didn't you already lose to him badly once? Like you just got out. Like why would I ever follow you? I think that it's obviously. I think when Jesus is describing the kingdom, he's describing the kingdom of heaven. And also, you think about like where the camp of the saints is. I believe it's literally like a heavenly city. You think about even Revelation 21, it descends down. I believe that the kingdom of heaven is much like the resurrected Jesus himself. Is he's both physical and he's spiritual. So like you could touch him, he could eat a meal, but at the same time he could walk through walls. So I think that the city is much like that, and it's for some reason we can't perceive it. Maybe we don't know. Some people believe it could be like where the North Pole is. You think about the Northern Lights. There's the exact color of God's throne. Is that possible? Is that possible? Why they limit your movement on this place, like where you can't go to certain locations? Maybe. And I think that to me, it's like so if we are in this time, if the devil were to deceive people, it might be a lot like the place we live in now, where we're like lots of us are waking up to everything we've been taught that was a lie, and we're wondering like what there's you can pick out more lies than more things you've been told the truth about at this point. At least I have in my research. It's like I haven't been able to find almost anything. You're like that too.
Yep.
That was not even true.
Everything.
And so I wonder like if you think about it, like is that how we could be deceived in this time, where like literally you don't even know which way's up. We don't know if we live on. People argue about what the shape of the earth is. They argue about every which thing, every different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. To me, it's kind of like that's where this research has led me. Was like first with the Bible, what Jesus said, and then the physical evidence of the things of like melted. Like literally. It's interesting. The Book of Revelation talks about a third of the earth being burned up. A third of the earth is deserts in the earth. There's actually even scientific things saying like a third of the sea life had died at some point. That's what the Bible says in the Book of Revelation. Like so, like some of these things seem to line up with could this be where we're at? And I think that we're still kind of doing the research, but I mean, it is a game changer as far as like the understanding of what we're looking at.
Right. Outcast. There's so much. I mean,
I'm digesting. I can't even. I'm just. I'm in awe of
Listen,
because this challenges my thinking quite a bit. So I'm just processing. But I'm not ever in a position to say that I know and that JT's right or wrong. I'm open minded. I'm listening.
yeah,
And I'm
you
gonna
have
have
to
to
figure
pray
out
on it. Read on
a place
it. Yeah.
for it to fit into, if it does fit in, but if it fits in logically,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's compelling. That desert comment he just made is really compelling. That's interesting.
Well, it's
Wow.
one of those things where, like, put it this way, the things I'm saying right now I don't take lightly. Before I started talking about this kind of stuff, my content was all tailored to the end times, about like everything's about to happen right now. And so when I started to go down this rabbit hole first, I was going down there to debunk it, because people were talking about, maybe these old world buildings are evidence of the millennial reign, and I was like, no, I don't need. That's not enough for me. I was like, the buildings aren't enough. It's definitely strange, but it's not enough. And it wasn't really until it was like all put together of like, you go look at the places in Turkey, Cappadocia, Turkey. Have you ever seen the pictures of like, there's like towers that look like they were melted like ice cream? Like
yeah,
there's
I've seen those. Yep.
absolutely just ruined places, like things that are underground in Turkey. And then, like I said, things out west that literally look like they've been melted like wax. There's evidence of all of these things all around the whole world. Buried things and burned things. And I'm not saying like that's for sure, but like I said, but then you tie it in with, if Jesus said all the things, you think about the thing that really got me was the audience specificity. So the audience relevancy. So like understanding that Jesus didn't write the gospels for people for 2,000 years from now. I'm not saying it's not for us, but it wasn't written to us. Jesus is talking to people. His disciples are writing down what he said to these certain people. And then you think, okay, so what would they have taken from this when, like, especially when John is saying, Jesus told me this to write to you guys. I'm coming soon. I'm coming, like all the things are I'm coming soon. Even the book of Daniel, it says in Daniel chapter 12, it says, Gabriel tells Daniel to seal up the words of this prophecy until the time of the end. Well, Jesus is quoting from the book of Daniel when he's there. Then you go to Revelation chapter 22, it says, do not seal up this prophecy because the time is at hand. And so like all the things he's saying are happening right now. Even think about the four beasts. The fourth beast is the Roman Empire. And during the fourth beast is when the kingdom of God is established, the kingdom that is forever. Jesus shows up when the fourth beast is in charge. And at some point, obviously, Rome falls. There's not a fifth beast. And I think that there's evidence that maybe that some of the evidence could be that some of that fourth kingdom was like, obviously, is that why there's Roman architecture everywhere? Maybe the kingdom was bigger than we thought it was. Maybe some of this stuff was built afterwards. I guess the thing is, it's hard to say. But what I am sure about is that things just don't line up unless that some of these things seem to be true. Like, isn't it funny even thinking about, like, we talk about BC and AD. So BC being before Christ, and Anno Domini, I believe, which means year of our Lord. So those things, that dating system wasn't even established until like around 500 AD. So before, they weren't counting down to something, but at some point the whole world decided, hey, this Christianity thing, this makes sense, even though the early Christian church was persecuted like mad. Isn't it kind of funny? Like, there's a shift where, like, literally there was a time where the Romans were trying to kill all the Christians when Nero was in charge. And then at some point they decided to be Christians. And literally they enacted the Theodosian laws at the beginning of the Dark Ages, where every other religion was outlawed. I think, to me, it seems like those are kind of significant moments in our history that we almost just take for granted, like, that those things happen at that time. And then even think about it now. So now we're in a time after the Dark Ages where the Enlightenment happens, heliocentric model, evolution. Obviously, all these atheists are coming out. Darwinism is rampant. And now, even today, they are trying to say BCE and CE. So now that's not before Christ anymore. It's before the Common Era. And now we're in the Common Era.
There you go.
So they change all the dates, the dating of all of history, based on the year of our Lord. And now they're trying to act like it didn't even happen. They're just going to say, well, it was a common era.
Yeah.
Like what?
Funny
You
how
know,
they
I
do
miss
that,
like,
right? Sneaky bastards. That's funny how they do that stuff. You know, it's almost like in the watching the opening ceremony for the Olympics. It's to sneak things in, put it right in your face. After a while, you figure it out. You know, we're down so many rabbit holes, and I love rabbit holes on the show.
I know that's a big one to drop.
It
to
is.
drop
I
on
mean,
you.
and I hope people go jump down them because I like rabbit holes. I mean, we have rabbit hole thread on our Gilded chat room chat. And, you know, there's so much stuff in there, you guys. But one that I want to, before we leave, I mean, we can hang out here for a little while, are the tunnels and cave systems and how they're connected and of course, we have tunnels that have been existing, you know, for we don't know how long. They're there. Then we have new tunnels that, you know, that man is creating, digging underground 7 miles per day. Are they connecting to these tunnel systems? Are they creating their own tunnel systems? What is it? I mean, Outcast, I mentioned earlier about Detroit, and JT, you know about what's under Detroit. I mean, the enormous salt mines. Before they closed the tours, we used to go down there. People could go down there, take tours, look at it. And there's semis down there. There's enormous caverns down below Detroit. I can't believe it hasn't fallen in yet. But these are small compared to the ones that are underneath mountain ranges. Underneath, out west, underneath where you're at, JT. I mean, what are we supposed to think about these and what's down in these tunnels? And for people don't know, we have to throw the DUMBs in there, the deep underground military bases, because those are the most advanced that we know of, technologically. Schools, hospitals, buildings, factories, gardening, swimming, all that stuff is down below in some of these DUMBs. These military bases, right?
Well, I think to go way back, you have all these mythologies all around the whole world about like basically being this kind of magical place of their gods. Was it Shambhala and Agartha are kind of like in the Far East mythologies that basically like some kind of heavenly place. Even think about like the movies like Land of the Lost. There's this fantastical underworld that's great. When obviously biblically the underworld is not so great. Biblically it's Sheol, it's Hades, it's basically hell's down there. But I think it's interesting when you consider that you have evidence all around the whole world of advanced megalithic stonework everywhere. So the people who could build things out of stone on the surface of the earth, you think about even like the famous saying, "As above, so below," like an Egyptian type thing. People always talk about the crazy stuff that's probably underneath Egypt. And I think that's probably true. I think it's probably true of everywhere. And two things could happen. I believe that the people who built things on top of the earth, obviously being able to move stones like that, could have tunneled down very deep into the earth. Some of these tunnels obviously might have been existed. Maybe they existed in the days of Noah. Now, there's also the possibility that during this, whatever this mud flood was, what if some of these things weren't really tunnels? They used to be part of the surface of the earth, and all of a sudden now they're underground. Mm-hmm. And then you think about like in America, you have like the stuff like the underground Atlanta, underground Seattle, underground Sacramento, underground Indiana, all like underground New York. There's evidence of things that are underground. And again, thinking about the timeline of America, the timeline of America is very short when you actually look at it. To think that some of the rapid expansion to these cities is already suspect. But when you consider there's basically a city underneath all these cities, when did they have time to do all that? You know what I mean? Like, so I'm starting to wonder if, for one, these tunnels could be ancient and they also could be recent. And obviously it could be a combination of the two, which probably is the most likely. When you think about stuff like where I did a video at one point talking about the Denver airport, and everybody talks about the tunnels under the airport. And even based on what they tell us, there's miles of tunnels under the airport. Well, I think they say that the Denver airport is like 54 square miles. So just going around the airport's miles. And then I think there's like to the south of it is you have the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, which was NORAD.
Yep.
And everyone always speculated, do you think the tunnels go to NORAD? I think they probably do. I think that there's a reason why they probably built the airport in where they built it at.
Yep.
It's maybe because it connected to the tunnels they already had. I mean, it makes sense to me. You have some secure military facility. Why wouldn't you build it near a tunnel system where you could get to it from like a major airport?
Well,
And then
JT,
some people even wonder if there's tunnels that are like intercontinental, like that you could go from. That's obviously stuff that I've heard. Would I doubt it if it was? I mean, I wouldn't doubt it.
I don't doubt it at all. I don't doubt it one bit. So you're talking about those massive underground tunnels. I would say that from Malibu off the coast of California into Denver all the way to the East Coast. From what I've heard in the past is you can take a submarine, not us, they can take a military submarine all the way through underneath. All right.
Somebody did actually say that there was some kind of way that somebody took a submarine somewhere from like the Gulf of Mexico to some place that obviously they should not have been able to get to. I can't even remember. We were talking about that on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Wish I knew but I know what you're saying. Like, but if you think about it biblically that there's waters above the firmament and there's waters under the earth. Like
Primary
literally,
water.
like that. Even it's funny that I never really noticed this until I started actually look at biblical cosmology a little more. When it was saying in the 10 Commandments, it was talking about graven images. It said, "Do not make images of things in heaven, things under the earth, and in the waters under the earth."
Yep.
So like literally, like biblically, that's like your underworld. There, it's like the deep.
That's our primary water that they don't want to talk about. They want to charge us for water and say it's, there's limited water supply because of the rain. And, you guys are cleaning or making it dirty and we got to clean it up and give it back to you, sell it back to you. No, there's primary water.
Scarcity is their game.
Scarcity,
right.
Scarcity
and fear.
Right.
Yep.
Well, I think that I've looked into this a little bit recently too, is that the world population numbers that I think that the world,
lies.
have you guys looked into that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think when they say that if you add up like all the cities, like the populations data that we have for all the cities, you only get around 2 million people. So like you'd have to conclude that like the rest of the world, like the rural parts, like off the grid would account for like 6 billion people. What did I say? 2 million? I mean, 2 billion people. And then maybe like 6 billion other people would be not living in cities. That doesn't make sense, but it does make sense if you want to say, oh, we're going to run out of oil, we're going to run out of coal, we're going to run out of fossil fuels, and therefore we have to go to something different. This is unsustainable. It obviously it makes sense that if you're selling this stuff, well, we might run out of it. I'm going to have to charge you a lot for this stuff.
There you go. Yeah, it's the same with electricity. Well, same with electricity and all the other stuff.
Or the term fossil fuels.
Yeah,
makes it sound like it's scarce. I don't know if you were going there at all, JT, but this is where my mind goes to with that. If you overinflate the number of people, that gives you a bigger buffer to manipulate elections too.
Yep. It works. Yes. It works in advantage. Yes. You put
absolutely. That. It's interesting that when you talk about the tunnels and stuff too, though, again, biblically, you think about like if there was resets, there was a major reset that we're like I was talking about. But like biblically, it talks about the great men and the kings hiding themselves in the rocks. There's biblically passages about going underneath the earth. Again, there's evidence in like Cappadocia, Turkey. It's possible that, again, like I'm not saying I know what happened with whatever reset happened with like potentially the mud flood. But have you guys ever watched that show Fallout?
Yeah, from the video game. I've seen parts of it.
Well, the interesting part about that show is like that. It's taking place in kind of almost like an alternate timeline that if there was nuclear war in the 50s and they're selling these fallout shelters. So there's all these people that go underground to ride out the apocalypse. And I just started to think about it. And so like in the show, and I'm sure in the video games, the same thing is that there's different bunkers. They call them vaults. And when they show that, they're doing all kinds of weird experiments down in certain parts of the vaults. And you think about like, some people like think all the cryptid activity comes from like, I don't know, just lost Nephilim or something like that. But what if some of that stuff is actually true? You have like people like like obviously you have a vault, you call it the dumbs, call it whatever you want. There's nefarious agencies doing all kinds of experiments on people, animals, all of the like. And it's interesting when you think about like what could be underneath the earth. Anything that would be down there would be scary and alien to us. And so if it came up on the surface, it only showed itself at sometimes. I mean, it actually makes sense. I think even that movie, it shows Stranger Things. There was like a secret base like in the desert.
Yeah.
And of course you talk about like the national parks and stuff, like places you can't go. Did the people go missing there? Like, I don't know where they went.
Yeah, go ahead,
and I'm not trying to. I apologize. This is the second time I'm bringing up Bigfoot, but a lot of these Bigfoot accounts, people will say that they hear the sound of like a metal gate moving in the woods before the sighting happens. Have you ever heard that, JT?
No, I have not, but I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, I think that there's places. I mean, I forgot there are certain places where I know people have talked about like Dog Man and all the weird stuff, and they're saying that like there's lots of those places where they see those things, they're off limits, and you can't fly drones there, you can't do this or that.
Yeah.
And when you really think about it, it's like, why would those places be off limits altogether anyways? It's like, what could they possibly be doing there in this? Like, why would the government care who's there? I mean, it is funny, like if you've ever gone to like, so I've gone hiking in several, national parks now or state parks. They're dangerous. I mean, obviously, you take your life in your hands when you go climbing on a mountain someplace. It's like, and if something bad happened to you, you could get hurt. So I don't really buy the idea that they really care so much. I mean, you think about like there's people where we live near the Appalachian Trail. People go hike the thing all the time. Like there's lots of places you could get hurt and stuff, but they try to like guise it and they don't want you hiking around there because it's dangerous. It's like, yeah, I mean, life's dangerous.
Yeah, driving a car is dangerous. Outcast, what were you going to say, Outcast? But we have to pay a license to do that. Sorry.
I want to share something with JT too that he might just find interesting to put in his his storage file there. This is, do with this what you will, but a friend of mine who passed away now, she was into precious stones and stuff. She was actually into new age garbage, but she was a sweetheart. She had good intentions. And she went to a gem show, and this guy had these gems on the table that would go for like $250,000. They were so big. We're talking like crystals and stuff from underneath the earth. And she said, normally you don't see that kind of stuff at a gem show. So she was asking the guy questions, and he had a Australian accent. Now this story goes back about 4 or 5 years ago. And she came out bluntly to him and she said, so is it true what they're saying about them pulling children out of the tunnels? And this guy looks at her and he goes, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but it's all true. He goes, I work for the government and I'm underground. And he said, everything that you're hearing in the underground channels is correct.
Wow. No, I mean, it's sad when that stuff actually doesn't surprise me anymore, because it's funny. Like I was just talking about this on a live stream not too long ago, was with Stranger Things. And somebody was asking me if I had watched that show. And I said, yeah, I saw the show. And I said, the crazy thing is people don't understand that that's based on a true story.
Yeah.
And of course, people are like, what? True story? And it's like, yeah, there's a place called Camp Hero in Montauk, New York. And yeah, those 3-letter agencies got in trouble. And I think even like Bill Clinton himself, he doesn't really say specifically, but he's like apologizing for the stuff they got caught doing. They're like experimenting on people with like radiation. They had kids in these places. They had animals. I think they were trying to get these kids to astral project and do all kinds of demonic stuff. They're torturing, torturing animals. And so what were they doing? I mean, so in the show, they opened some portal.
Yep.
I mean, so did that really happen? I mean, I think that obviously if you see it on a TV show, it's going to show some kind of fantastical, like you literally see like the wall opening up and stuff like that. I don't think that that's how the portals to the underworld or to the upside down are opened up. They're opened up in a different kind of way that you might not be able to visualize. But interesting in that show, the Demigorgon is released, which interesting is like, Gorgons were demons in Greek mythology. Obviously, Demigorgon, demon gorgons, and that's the monster in the first one. And like, it comes in and out of some tree in the forest, snatches kids. Yeah, the girl in the show is called 11. That's her number. And you think going back to Lester Crowley, the magic number is 11. Mm-hmm. Then they call her El, Elohim. El means God. Yep. Like they're showing you all kinds of true things here. And it's like, but that was all about what these 3-letter agencies were doing to try to obviously excite demons in some kind of way, like torturing kids and animals.
JT,
You know, oh,
well,
sorry.
Outcast, I think we're about to say the same thing about what the government is trying to reproduce and trying to work a timeline before their timeline works against them. We've talked about it on the show a bunch. Let's get into it a little bit right here with JT.
Well, I have this sneaking suspicion that if God is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent, and he's not held by a linear time, we could potentially be working with a sliding time scale that is being played out in an epic celestial chess game. That's a possibility. Or the other thought I've had a lot too is that as we approach the potential end times, the dark ones are in a race, and they would rather drag as many people to hell with them as possible, as opposed to let the judgment come and just take them. They want to bring as many people with them, and that would explain why their agendas are the year 2030. That would explain why they're in such a hurry, why they're exposing themselves at such an exponential rate. I mean, yes, evil does overstep its parameters every time it's given an opportunity. Even the exorcists, these priests, that will tell you the same thing, that's the one fault of evil, is it gets overconfident. And anyways, so I'm all over the place thinking there. I also want to share some of the, before we jump into that too, JT. Jesse, I've been meaning to tell you the story, but I have a neighbor who walks his dog, and he's a really tall guy, tall, slender guy. He had aspirations of being a basketball coach. Young guy's name, I'll leave his name out of it. He's friendly, and I've been talking to him more and more. And one day, I don't know, I got into it with him because I don't know how I started talking to him about weird stuff, which is what I do. I try to reel people in. And he said, well, I was raised with Catholicism, but I don't go to church now. But I do know that there's a spiritual realm, because he said, this is his words. He goes, because I took DMT, and he starts explaining an out of body experience that he had. I said, well, that's an out of body experience, and I believe you. And I said, but there's more to the story, and I want to share it with you. So I said, so one of these days, you're going to come back in my patio, and I'm going to tell you a deeper biblical narrative, and also explain to you the potential danger you were in by doing that. But he thinks he had a spiritual experience, like something magical was happening, and I think that he was in a very dangerous realm. But he's a very nice guy. He's very open-minded. He looks like he's no more than 30. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him about that. I just had to throw that in the mix too, because when you're talking about stranger things, have you
ever seen that one meme when it's saying like that I'm spiritual, and it's like, well, demons are spiritual too. So could you be a little more specific? Because so I believe that it was spiritual, but it's interesting like how you talk about the different kinds of ways that you can kind of almost like doorways into the spiritual dimension, the upside down, maybe even. And I think at the end of the day, like that the idea of opening a portal, it's almost just like more like a gateway to the other side. I mean, and if you think about, like, again, going back to the topic of like giants, in the book of Enoch, it mentions that the deceased Nephilim, the giants, became unclean spirits. And so if these beings, interestingly enough, that if these beings had the knowledge of how to build the megaliths, maybe obviously not just building megaliths, obviously what powered them, whatever kind of tools they had, whatever kind of knowledge they had, these wicked bodiless entities would still have some of that knowledge. And so in order to pacify them, I think that's where you get into like obviously the most depraved things, because in the book of Enoch, how wicked these beings were. And in the same way that they would still be requiring some kind of a sacrifice and some kind of blood in order probably to get the knowledge, the gnosis, to do whatever these wicked people are trying to do. It is interesting that the idea of like opening portals, you guys have probably, I'm sure you've researched Jack Parsons a little bit. And they were doing the Babylon working, and supposedly he opened up a portal somewhere in California that maybe potentially didn't get shut, and it had something to do with the Whore of Babylon. I mean, insane stuff. But I mean, like, and this guy was actually credited with starting JPL, what powers NASA's rockets, right? If you believe in all that stuff. So his guy was a literal Thelemite, a disciple of Lester Crowley, a straight up Satanist by every measure. And that's the guy who was doing all the science.
Yep.
Right.
And
so like
they were working together.
Then you go to like a place like CERN, and it's like, is that kind of what they're doing at CERN too? Because they have a statue to Shiva. The site has a temple to Apollyon on it. Apollyon, like Apollo. Apollion's mentioned in the bottomless pit in the book of Revelation. Like, is that science? Like, is that stuff science? Or is it magic? Or is it some kind of combination of the two?
Sits on the 33rd parallel. It's identical to where the seat of the throne of Satan is. I mean,
just look at the last, I don't know how many years it's been since we had cell phones in our pockets and how fast, we've leapt. And here we are, your average person on the street doesn't even know how many states there are, can't name a capital city. You can't do mathematics. The general public is getting dumber by the minute, but yet we're carrying around like super high tech. Where did this come from? And it seems if you look at like every major civilization, they have these huge leaps in technological advancements that put them in an advantage. Were they at times, those cultures tapping into the darker realms for information and having these leaps, boom, 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 right? And we're looking at one right now. It's more, as opposed to stone cutting and architecture or ziggurats, we've got this super crazy high-tech piece of machinery that tracks and surveils and creates a prison for us in our hands. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here, but
yeah, no, it makes sense.
I think people have noticed that, and I think if you just believe them, okay, I'm not saying I believe any of this stuff, but I'm just saying, like, based on what we're taught, we went from horses and buggies to the moon within 100 years, so yeah, that's obviously a rapid advancement in technology, by any measure. So what I've wondered at this point is it so rapid is because it's either reverse engineering things that they found, or this is stuff that they already had and they were re-releasing it slowly or not so slowly in order to get people to accept that it wasn't alien technology or something.
Or
wow.
a third option, has our government, high top officials, maybe not even in the government, are they trading human sacrifices for technology?
Makes sense to
me. If you really think about it, going back to the book of Enoch, it mentions, like, in not so many words, it's like the sons of Cain, or Cain's line traded their women basically for this knowledge.
Yes.
And so when it says that the Watchers gave these people all this knowledge of things, well, yeah, it makes sense that angels, whether they're spirits and there can be manifest physically or not, that they know a lot more about how this place works. Obviously, God, our creator, has a fingerprint on this place, and he's a God of order. And so if they knew about the thing, they could obviously help man gain leaps in technology.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, to me, it's like that there's always been like this idea that some of the pre-flood knowledge was kept possibly in some place like Egypt. Maybe that's what the secret society is all about, like either hiding, tapping into, like, what did they know? Like, what's in those vaults at the Vatican with like the 58? Have you ever heard how many miles of bookshelves there are? I read 58 miles of secret libraries down in, like, bookshelves in those libraries down in the Vatican.
Well, I have heard that there's a
like
lot
what
of
like so like
off
what
limits,
like what
but
what's
yeah.
down there? Like, can you even imagine like what kind of knowledge is down there of our past and the things we only speculate about,
and things we aren't allowed to see. They won't let us walk around down there, just like they won't let us walk around the national forest. They won't.
No, I mean, you think about it. They've always told us for years that knowledge is power,
Yep.
right? I mean, I believe that knowledge is important. I know that I'm not a Gnostic, so I know that we're saved by God's grace and faith. So, like, you're not saved by knowledge. But yeah, I do think it's important. He's like, but they lord the knowledge over us.
Yeah.
So if knowledge is power, well, why would they give it to you or not? Because obviously that would be giving up their power and their authority. And obviously they can, maybe through the knowledge they have, they can predict the future. And it's like, I think that the place we live on is a very cyclical place. And I think that even if I believe that a lot of the stuff from Revelation already happened, I believe, like, just like Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's repeating cycles of this story that it does kind of come to the end, and it's similar in that way. And I think, again, you go back to what Solomon said. If Solomon was the wisest man ever, he said there was nothing new under the sun. You think that something's new? Oh, that's already been.
Yep.
I think that's what he meant. Like that you think, because he probably likely had knowledge of before the flood. And when people say, "Oh, you think that's crazy?" You have no idea. That stuff has already happened long ago.
It never ends,
Wow.
Outcast. It never
No.
ends. Things keep
Nope.
coming. They keep developing new things. They keep. The final story is that they, like you said earlier, I believe, Outcast, that they need our souls. Satan needs our soul. He can't let God have our souls.
He hates us as God's creation.
Yep.
He hates the fact that that the angelics were intended to look after us and not harm us, and he sees us as beneath him. I mean, there's a myriad of reasons that they would want to destroy us. They hate God. I mean, they're apostate sons of God,
Yep.
and our spiritual freedom is just a reminder of their condemnation. So they're going to drag as many people to hell with them as possible, and that's why we say it on the show a lot lately. I do, and I'm repeating myself, but we're seeing this tearing away of two realities. If you want to use the Matrix model, the people who are buying into the narratives of all cultural narratives are being dragged, in my humble opinion, straight to hell, because they're going to buy everything that's sold to them. And the devil is known for the great, he's going to present a great delusion. Then there's those of us who have been aligning our hearts and minds with the heart and mind of Christ, and with that we've been given revelations and revealings, and with that we feel like we're living in almost an alternate reality. There's two things taking place. You got Antifa, Black Lives Matter people running wild with anger and rage and hatred and intolerance in their hearts, trying to attack anybody that doesn't think like them. They've gone more animalistic than ever before, and here we are seeking love and forgiveness. It's never been more clear in as long as I've lived, how this tearing away is happening. Yes, I think there are people lost in the middle, but they're being either awakened every day or being lured in. But what's remarkable to me, and I've said it again on the show, I apologize to our listeners who've heard me say it before. Our standard churches have reduced the Bible to a book of moral fairy tales. And then you go join a church and it acts just like culture. You've got a rock concert on stage, nothing against that, but you've got a rock concert on stage to entertain you. You've got little clubs within there. So if you want to do a stitching club, or if you want to do a gaming club or whatever, they just or fantasy football that just tied it together. You've got, and that I don't think that's what the higher calling is. I don't think it's mimicking culture within your Christian subculture. But while that's happening at our churches, the world is getting darker and darker by the minute. So if you're a normie and you're going, wow, Taylor Swift just did a black cloak hooded incantation while standing in a circle, they're getting darker. Little Nas X is lap dancing on Satan's lap, and they're pulling us into a darker realm of spirituality. Meanwhile, my church is denying the spirituality of the book. Right? I think that I think we all think of the same here. I believe I'm assuming a lot, but I think JT thinks like us. The main churches are not the way either. You got to be rooted in love and in service to other people. I'm not saying I'm pulling it off entirely myself, but it's not, I don't think it's about little clubs within your church. I think it's about hitting the streets and maybe, feeding somebody or doing good deeds for people. And the churches are doing us a disservice. And that's why people fall away from the church. They get in there and they go, well, this is just a big social club and it feels just like the real world, the regular world. Well, I'm not getting answers here. This is just more the same of what the world's offering me. We got to be really careful. Maybe some of us right here are being called to start our own churches and do something different. If you look at the book of Acts, they were pooling their resources just to help the poor and the needy and the widows. They weren't worried about, fantasy football night.
No, I agree with you. Good. Yeah, amen, brother. I think that what people have, again, like that words have meanings and they lose their meanings over time and people forget. Like the church is the people. The church is the believers, but like we've been taught and I know that I'm not the only person who knows this, that people got to be reminded that it's not the building. So when the building's not there, you still have the church. And when you think about it, like that, I believe that when Jesus talks about your daily bread, you think about even just like the Lord's Prayer about give us this day our daily bread. Like you're supposed to be eating every day. Obviously, if you only ate one day a week, you would starve. Like, you would obviously be skinny and weak, and you'd be useless. So we're supposed to be getting fed at home. And I think the more you do that, the more you go into the brick and mortar churches, you find out they're not feeding you any solid food in there. So if you're eating solid food in your house daily, then you go in there and they try to give you a baby's bottle, and you're like, I don't need this. I think that there was one church I went to, and they were preaching literally. Well, I went to there one time, and I stopped going, but I followed them on Instagram, and the pastor did some kind of message about like this Taylor Swift song, and it was like the "It's Me" song, and he was like using that as an analogy of like that. Oh yeah, you're the problem. It's you, and you need God so you can fix this problem. But the funny part about it was like, I had already been doing this for a while now. I've been making videos and podcasting and stuff. And I was breaking down the video for that song. And it's literally about her being possessed by demons.
Yeah.
And I told him, I remember on the comment section, I was like, have you seen the video for that? I was like, yeah, that's literally about demon possession. It's me. Like, that's like, it's an alternate version of herself is the Taylor Swift. That's like the crazy one. Yep. And of course they deleted my comment. And I think that eventually it's like, I bet you even them probably woke up to the fact that all the Taylor Swift stuff about like her doing that Willow concert and all the witchcraft stuff on stage. Yeah. And it's like, so you're trying to appeal to, you're trying to have this seeker friendly church to bring more people in, but then you're making the church like the outside. And then it's kind of like when you have to choose between like Taylor Swift or Taylor Swift Light, you might as well just go to the Taylor Swift concert. You might as well just go to the concert. If you want the rock concert, just go see a real one, not go to see some watered down version of the gospel that's powerless. And I think that to us, it's like, yeah, you separate yourself. There's people who love the world and those people who don't love the world and are denying themselves of this stuff. And when you do get that separation, man, you can see it so clearly.
Yep.
And yeah, you just don't want any part of it. And it's like, have no fellowship with darkness. Expose it.
Yeah, we always call it out here on this show. I mean, I'm always yapping about these people that are out there singing these stars and all that stuff. I'm always out there hollering about that stuff because it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts, and I can't stand it. And then I look over here, all these normies are just cheering at the at the screen or up at the stage, and I'm like you guys don't even see it. The tour is called Eris.
Right. It's idolatry.
You guys don't even. It's very frustrating, is what I'm saying. Very frustrating to know things, and then be placed inside of these things because people around you want you to go and be there. So I'm sitting there like this, like the guy that's, tells the worst jokes at the party, right? That's me, because no matter what I say here, I mean, okay, I'll pretend to enjoy it. Here we go. I'm going to enjoy it a little bit. So it's crazy, man. I don't know. The church is within us, though. Mm-hmm. Get a couple of us together. We talk about this stuff. This stuff sometimes to me feels like church, because of what we talk about, what we go through. We learn a lot of things taking these crazy rabbit holes, because the inside the Bible is being revealed so much by these things that we talk about. Some of the stuff they'll never talk about over there at the churches the way we do. Why is that? Who's telling them not to talk like that? Instead, they're talking about things that make you, it seems like a therapy session or just a place to talk about your feelings and all this. It's motivational.
Motivational speaking, self-help, but it's a powerless.
That's not being a bold Christian. That's not being, sharpening iron. What is that? Mm-hmm. It's making soft, weak, unknowing, easily decepted people. God didn't want that.
No, he gave his disciples authority in his name, and like I said, right. I think that's what people miss. And I think sometimes when, let's say I'm not right about maybe the short season idea, but I do know for sure that Jesus said the kingdom is here. Like he was saying, the kingdom is here. The kingdom is at hand. He's like, the kingdom is within you. And then he told them to go in his name, cast out demons, heal the sick, preach the gospel. And so and I think that authority comes from, there was a time where God's people really couldn't go to these pagan nations and and do anything in God's name. But after Jesus was resurrected, he changed everything.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a boldness that we should have. And I think that the Great Commission is not go take people to a seeker-friendly church. It's to go out. It's like you're supposed to go make disciples of all nations. Like the church, I feel like the church should gather together in fellowship in order to make plans of how to go out and do it. But you don't want to water it down so people come in. You want to bring the truth to them, and then them to be changed, and then come to gather to get together with you later.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Wise words, brother. Wise words. Listen, Outcast, we got to start wrapping this thing up. I want you to do some final thoughts with JT here before we get going. I'm going to go through some of these chats here and look for some gold pills if we have any, and some rumble rants.
Okay, so this scripture from Thessalonians is popping out at me. It touches on a little bit of everything we were touching on tonight. So I'm just going to read this one real quick. This is 2 Thessalonians 2:9. The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with how Satan works. He will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie, and all the ways that wickedness deceive those who are perishing. They perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. For the reason God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie, and so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth, but have delighted in wickedness. So, I don't know. I mean, we have to be on high alert. We've got strong delusions everywhere. The culture is designed to blind us and hide the truth. It's everything we were talking about tonight. That is just part of the great deception. That is the way of the evil one, and that's the way that he keeps people off the path of recognizing their holy assignment that they were sent here for when they were chosen by Jesus Christ himself before the foundation of the earth was even laid, to be alive right now. As I mentioned earlier in my prayer, we really have to understand who we are in this battle, or we don't even have a chance. If we just let the world suck us in and tell us we're the sum of our hard work and we're the sum of our accumulations and those types of things, the dark side has already won. That is a great delusion. If we have our sights set towards something greater and bigger beyond ourselves, rooted in love and truth, we are going to be closer to serving the purpose we were sent here for. So my message, I guess, this week would be just keep digging for truth. Whatever JT or myself or Jesse, any of us say on the show, pray and use your discernment and seek the Holy Spirit for guidance and try to find truth, but keep your mind open. Don't close yourself off to anything, and don't believe every narrative you're told. Always question, but also seek the Lord and he will show you the way. So that's my message for this week. And I think that ties in pretty good with everything that JT brought to us today.
Yeah, I do too. Awesome. Thanks, brother. You touched on short season just a bit. There's other things that we haven't touched on. We didn't talk about the red heifers, the third temple, Leviticus, and all these things. I'm inviting you onto another show. We can probably do this again and go deeper. We have so much. We have, as always, we don't get into these or we don't finish everything we want to talk about. Hence the stuff we talked about last night, JT. So,
oh yeah, there's so much there. I want to speak on that verse you shared there, but I think it's good. And I think it's a good example of like that. I think a lot of us, when we woke up, we noticed that we missed a lot of very obvious signs of things. And it's like, because you think about it, like the delusion comes to the people who don't love the truth. And if you think about it, like in a lot of ways where people get frustrated by people who you can't see this, like it's a spiritual condition. It's not eyesight. It's literally the truth changes people, right? If you're willing to let it, Jesus can't change you if you don't let him.
Mm-hmm.
Like God the Father is not going to use you if you don't let him change you. And I think that's what really you see in this culture. And it's like, I think that it wasn't until I was willing to admit that I may have had everything wrong in my life that I was able to see what was true. And I think that that's ultimately where you have to go. It's like that. Yeah. Changing is uncomfortable. The truth hurts. But if you're willing to let it change you, obviously that's going to make all the difference. And I think that's where it starts, where that I think he was in Corinthians, it's like be willing to become a fool so you can become wise. And I don't think it means act like an idiot. It just means like be willing to acknowledge that we don't know a lot of this stuff. Like I said, we're waking up from the Matrix, and we're kind of like, I know that's not a godly movie, but like you're like Neo, and you're just learning all this stuff, and it makes like remember he throws up at the beginning because it's like, get away from me, stop. But I mean, I think ultimately you can, through the power of God, it can make all the difference, and you can, I just think that to me is like the example. I really think is the truth that these things are not actually, like some of the stuff we say is really crazy, and the more you research some of the crazy stuff, but most of the stuff is like, we always say hidden in plain sight because it's right there. It's like most of these things you can point to, like it's literally right there. And it really wasn't until you were willing to acknowledge that if that is the way it is, well, what does that mean for my life and the way I'm living right now? And if you're willing to say, well, I'll change, then it's like, then it's plain as day.
You tapped into something interesting there. I wanted to comment on. The thing that got Lucifer cast out of heaven is his pride. And for you to say, or myself or Jesse to go, hey, everything I believed was wrong, and now I'm looking at things differently, that takes humility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So part of when you come to the Lord and acknowledge his power and his majesty and all that he's done for you, you start to gain humility. You start to lose yourself. And that is the beginning of learning more. He's going to say, now I'm ready to teach you stuff because you've humbled yourself. You don't know everything. I remember when I was younger, my wife would ask me a question when we were dating, and I always felt like I had to have the answer like I knew. So I sounded like I knew stuff. And now I go, we'll talk about some deep stuff once in a while. I'm like, I don't know. I'll tell you what I think or what could be or something I ponder, but I don't know. The more we learn, the less we understand. And back to the beginning of the program, we said, with great knowledge comes great sorrow. Sometimes it's hard to know this stuff, but I don't want to do it any other way though. I'd rather be here than be blinded by the Super Bowl and Taylor Swift. I even if it is lonely, I feel set apart. I feel, we think we should feel chosen in that role. But JT, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you had fun. I hope that you enjoyed our time together. You'll consider coming back again. Yeah,
this is a blast, guys. I really appreciate this. Obviously, all the topics we talked about, and again, I have my own podcast, so we could never talk about all the things. So I don't think feel bad to not get to all of it today, because again, that's the whole thing is like that I'm like probably everybody who's listening too, that I'm still searching these things out, and obviously there's things that I'm still researching, and I'm willing to be proven wrong about things because I care more about what's true than being right. So this is a blast.
Awesome. Well, we had a great time with you, brother. Before you go here, I want to go and switch over here and look at your Instagram. You guys want to go follow him? JT follows JC on Instagram. Just under 95,000 followers over there. Awesome. And look at all the stuff he's got over there. All this fictional facts. So I know that you guys, if you're not familiar with him here, you've seen a lot of his videos. There's a lot of stuff that he goes through all the time. I mean, this stuff is great. So keep on doing what you're doing, brother. And we'll stay in touch, and we'll get back on to, get you back on the schedule and do this again. There's just so much. It's a never ending supply. Is what I'm saying, of craziness.
3 years worth of stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. So, all right, Jay. Any final words, JT, before you want to say to the people before we head out?
Just say, like, obviously, I know the short season stuff. Obviously, anybody who reads the Bible, I know that can be controversial, and believe it was controversial to me too. So, I would say that don't trust me. Read the Gospels again. Read the Bible with like audience relevancy. Try to put yourself in the position of the people who are, the Bible was written to at the time, and be a Berean. So like, I never tell people just to trust me, bro. Look these things up yourself. And if you guys want to hear more about this, and if you, like I said, obviously we just scratched the surface on some of these topics. I've done a lot of podcasts about this, pretty deep dives into it. And we're still just scratching the surface on this. So appreciate it, guys. Yeah. Thanks again for having me on.
Awesome, brother. Listen, stay dangerous out there and keep doing what you're doing, and we'll talk soon. All right. We'll see you. Take care. At JT follows JC on socials. You guys go check him out right now.